This is the entire history of planet Earth. Over here is where Earth formed, and over here is where we are today. This is when we first have evidence of life. This is where we first see complex life. Over here is where all of the dinosaurs went extinct, and this is all the history of modern society as we know it. Over 90% of all living things that have been alive on planet Earth in this time have died. Sometimes we get lucky and they leave something behind. This is Geology 101. Let's talk about it. Hey there, rock stars. Michael Stone here with another edition of Geology 101. Wanted to talk to you all today about fossils. What is a fossil? How do they form? Why does this matter? Why do I care? Why should you care? Fossils are any remains or impression of an animal or living thing that was left in the past. In general, we're talking at least 10,000 years old or older. Everything from this piece of petrified wood, this spider trackway, spider footprints, and this trilobite are all fossils. Haha! Wow! But how do you form fossils? As I mentioned earlier, 90% of all life that has ever existed on the planet is already dead. It already died. Within that subset, take all the giant, massive pile of dead things that have all existed on the planet, roll it all up into a giant ball, and then Katamari Damacy style, only a very small percentage of that massive amount of dead things that actually be preserved as fossils. But why is that, you know? I mean, even within the amount of things that are preserved, there are certain kinds of animals that are preferentially preserved over others. For example, the hard-bodied organisms like this trilobite right here that had a hard carapace, a hard shell, and other animals like this ammonite fossil that I have as well are made up of hard-bodied parts, and those tend to preserve very easily. That's why most of the time when you find a animal preserved, it's going to be a skeleton of that animal because the bones are the most resistant parts to wearing away over time. Other animals like insects, I've got this insect trackway here, and insect remains are very hard to find. They're surprisingly rare, even though insects today make up the majority of life on Earth. Most animals, or most living things, are insects just by the sheer volume, just by the sheer numbers there. So there is preferential preservation. Big PP there for you. He said PP. The big PP there, preferential preservation of animals, will definitely affect what we see. There is something called the fossil record bias, meaning that the animals that we have found and animals and other living things that we found in the fossil record biases our interpretation of the past because it isn't complete, because we're only seeing the small sliver of that population that was preserved. But how does this happen? Because there's a number of different steps that has to happen for a living thing to become a fossil. First, that animal or plant or whatever it is has to die. And that is the hard truth, the gritty truth of fossils. Something's gotta die to be preserved for millions of years. Of course, there can be fossil footprints. It doesn't have to be the actual body of the animal. It could be an imprint, an impression that the animal left behind. And that kind of immediately splits fossils into two categories, where you have trace fossils, which is just the impression, the footprints of an animal that's been left for millions of years, at least 10,000 years. And then there are the body pieces of an animal. In order to get a body part or a body piece or the entire thing, if you're really lucky, of an animal, the animal has to die, and then it has to be buried very rapidly, because if it isn't buried right away, it's going to be scavenged, it's going to be subjected to the wind and the elements, and it will quickly scatter those body pieces. They'll quickly be destroyed or decomposed, and there will be nothing left, essentially. It'll just be obliterated, and its elements will be scattered to the winds. Once the thing has died and the thing has been buried, then the fossilization process can occur. In general, what's going to happen is the animal is going to be slowly replaced by minerals. Permineralization, as it's called, where all of the living body tissues are filled in with minerals, or in some cases completely replacing the original structure of that creature. For example, this piece of petrified wood here resembles a normal piece of wood, except it's pretty much a solid piece of stone. I completely hurt my hand there knocking on this piece of wood, which is no longer wood anymore. It's been completely filled in and replaced by minerals that have completely soaked into the wood's pore space, and then over time, the mineral saturated liquids that have streamed through the sedimentary rock as it was forming completely replaced the actual wood particles, the actual organic molecules of this wood, which is completely fascinating. Oh my goodness! You can have, in some cases, original body parts, original pieces of bone that have simply filled in with minerals and that have been preserved, but that's very rare. It's very rare to get any original actual body parts of any kind. Another thing that can happen is you can have a cast or a mold that will form. Say, for example, a fossil shell sits on the bottom of a very muddy lake, and then the shell gets completely decomposed, but a perfect little mold of what that shell looked like is left on the bottom there. That will be your mold, and that can be preserved as a fossil. However, take it even a step further. If that mold gets filled in with more sediment, then you have a cast resembling the mold, resembling the original fossil, which looks almost exactly like this. This is the cast of the mold of the actual ammonite. Actually, I think it's a nautilus. I don't think it's an ammonite. But you get the idea. You know. Very rarely, if something dies and is buried so quickly, or maybe makes it into a pocket of water in a lake that is anoxic, meaning there's no oxygen, it won't be scavenged. It won't be touched at all. It won't decompose all that much. And if it gets quickly buried, covered with sediment or completely encased in volcanic ash, you can actually get extremely well preserved animals, an entirely intact specimen. And that is the holy grail of all paleontologies, a paleontology wet dream. It's that perfect fossil. Completely 100% preserved, which is totally awesome. What's called Laggerstatten is sites that have extremely well preserved fossils and animals. Things like the feathered dinosaurs in China have been found in very specific areas. In for example, China, those animals fell into lakes, died, and were quickly covered up by volcanic ash and during volcanic eruptions. So that created a perfect storm for the preservation of not only those dinosaurs, but also the feathers on those dinosaurs as well, which has been a huge recent discovery. But why does this matter? Why do we care if something's been opalized and amberized and, you just, you might be, hey, Mr. Stone, what are you talking about? Why do I even care if, this animal's been, alive and stuff? Big whoop, things die all the time. To which I say, stop being a negative Nancy, Mr. Nancy Pants. That's not cool. This piece of horn coral, which is a coral that is now extinct, that lives in the ocean, this deep sea sponge, it's not a deep sea, this is just a sponge, it's a fossilized sponge. These fossils, and also this preserved what I believe, it's kind of hard to tell, could be an ammonite or a nautiloid. I think it's probably a nautiloid, but you never know. Which is also an ocean animal, a praise helix. All of these fossils had to have lived and died in the ocean, but they were found, in some cases by me, I found these two fossils here, are found in Arizona. Like, what? Because there's no ocean in Arizona. Careful. Last I checked anyway, there wasn't an ocean there. So how did these fossils get there? What it tells us is that the Earth has changed. In the Cretaceous period, there was an interior seaway through Arizona and much of the central United States where these animals lived. But as the geological forces in the areas changed, namely the Colorado Plateau rose up, it completely changed the geology of the area, the sea receded, the land moved up, and things changed to where they are currently, where they are right now. And without the fossil evidence, we'd be missing a huge piece of that picture. We'd be missing out on a big piece of what was going on at the time. And so the fossil record is a rich, incredibly dense resource that tells scientists and tells us all so much about how life on Earth used to be and how it's changed, and in a lot of ways how things have been the same. Because these cycles of death and extinction and mineralization and fossilization have been going on pretty much as long as there have been animals alive. So there you have it, rock stars. That's paleontology in a nutshell. Geo 101, super simplified example, not super simplified it. Please let me know if you like this video. Give it a thumbs up, comment, like, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Please smash that subscribe button. But most importantly, let me know what you'd like to see next time. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the paleo stuff, please let me know, because there's paleontology used for so much to let us know about the history of the world. So super cool, super happy that I could share that with you today. And yeah.